loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good evening, I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. The Ukrainian president has accused Russian soldiers of deliberately planting landmines in the north of the country as they withdraw. The claim by Volodymyr Zelensky has not yet been independently verified. Russia's defense ministry has also not responded to the allegations. It follows an official from President Zelensky's office saying Ukrainian troops have retaken more than 30 towns or villages across the Kiev region.
They are mining houses, mining equipment, even the bodies of people who were killed. There are a lot of tripwires, a lot of other dangers. We are moving forward, we are moving carefully, and everyone who returns to this territory must also be very careful.
The Red Cross is attempting to carry out another evacuation in the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. It follows an agreement with Russia to open 7 humanitarian corridors for civilian evacuations. Overnight, buses of refugees arrived in Zaporizhia. Some of the passengers are reported to have stood throughout the 12-hour journey due to the huge number of people trying to escape. Russia's space director says his country will no longer cooperate on the International Space Station. Dmitry Rogozin says normal ties with NASA and other agencies will only be possible once what he's calling illegal sanctions against Moscow are lifted. It's after an American astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts landed safely in Kazakhstan on Wednesday, having left the ISS on board the same capsule. The suspension of P&O Ferries services is being partly blamed for long queues at Dover today. 3 of the operator's vessels are berthed in the port after safety inspections. Drivers have reportedly been forced to wait for hours to board ferries. The Department for Transport says efforts are being made to minimise the disruption. A further 20 people have been arrested in Essex as climate change activists continue to block oil terminals. It takes the total number of arrests to 83 after 2 days of protests. Activists from the group Just Stop Oil are said to be against expanding UK oil and gas production. It's been confirmed Metropolitan Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick will leave her post on April the 10th. She's tweeted, "It's been a tremendous honour to serve the people of London and the UK." Dame Cressida quit in February after the Mayor of London said he'd lost confidence in her leadership. Protests have been taking place across the UK over rising energy costs. Yesterday, millions around the UK saw their energy bill increase by an average of £700 a year with the price cap increase. An austerity campaign group says the demonstrations will highlight the real hardships people are facing, with many having to choose whether to eat or heat. Asda's chairman, Lord Stuart Rose, has told GBNews the government has been slow to act and it needs to do more now to support people who are struggling.
I would just emphasise to the powers that be that they have to, first of all, remember that we are the 6th largest economy in the world. I myself was walking down the street the other day and saw a large queue of people queuing outside a food bank. And I thought to myself, here we are, the 6th largest economy in the world, and we've got people queuing for food. That can't be right and it can't be sustainable. So we've got to find a way in the short term of helping them.
Parents and carers can now book COVID jabs for children aged 5 to 11 in England. They'll be able to make an appointment for a vaccine or go to a walk-in clinic from Monday. Children will be offered 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab, at least 12 weeks apart. And today marks 40 years since Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands. 255 British soldiers died, along with 650 Argentinians in the conflict, after Margaret Thatcher ordered the territory to be recaptured. Boris Johnson has paid tribute to those who served and tweeted saying, "Our commitment to them is as steadfast as it was in 1982. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. We'll have more news at the top of the next hour. Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK's looking a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers and remaining rather chilly. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest will be rather cloudy, particularly in the west, where there'll also be the most frequent showers. The best of the sunny spells will be across eastern areas. The southeast will be mostly dry, although an isolated light shower is possible this evening. The winds will be light, with plenty of sunny spells. There'll also be sunny spells and isolated showers across Wales, but drier for much of the day, especially in the west. It will be a mostly dry end to the afternoon across the Midlands too. An isolated light shower is possible, but for most it will be light winds and bright or sunny spells. The northeast of England will finish Saturday afternoon with plenty of dry weather. Earlier showers will have faded and we end the day with light winds and plenty of sunshine on offer. There'll also be plenty of sunshine across southern Scotland this evening. There'll be some cloud at times too, but it will remain dry to end the day. It's a similar story for Northern Ireland this evening. Dry here also, with some fair weather, cloud and sunny spells, leading to a cold and frosty night to come. Clear spells and light winds will also lead to a cold and frosty night across most of the UK tonight, and that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, it's Saturday, which means it's time for the Saturday selection. Coming up on today's show, should you be worried about the COVID cases rising? We speak to Professor Carl Hennigan to find out. And it's been 40 years since Argentinian forces invaded the Falkland Islands. We speak to former Security Minister and Falklands veteran Lord West. But joining us today, Phil?
With the stories from the week's papers is futurist and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. Andrew, what's been catching your eye?
Well, first of all, it's delightful to see you both back again. The perfect start to any Saturday. Last time I saw you, I was actually Sir Tim Rice. I was watching your programme, and all of a sudden, if he ruled the world, he said, if I ruled the world, men over 35 wouldn't wear shorts. And I was sat in my shorts.
Oh, my word.
I thought, well, as soon as I reach 35, I'll worry. So, well, it has been extraordinary. It's been the worst of weeks, it's been the best of weeks, from the goodwill slapping to Joe Biden's slip, all of those sort of things. It's been pretty horrendous, but I always thought we should start the papers with a glorious pun, because the pun is mightier than the sword. And I know you're going to talk about the draw later, but I love this one from our good friends at The Sun. It's Iranian men. Hallelujah. Come on. It's like good. But not only that, it's a double pun to get us going on a Saturday, because it's coming Omen. Because he's there saying, we play on day one for the first time since 66. I was hoping that they wouldn't take at least a couple of paragraphs to mention 66, but they always do. The other thing that's really interesting is the song It's Coming Home is now trending on Twitter. It's all coming home, and so we can see all that sort of stuff as well. But the thing that's dominating the news, and it's rather sad, this actually, and I'll tell you why, it's all about Will Smith. And we just heard about his resignation. And we've just heard, and people make jokes about goodwill slapping and men in black and blue and so on and so forth, but there's some serious issues there. And only in the glorious history of the Academy have there ever been 5 people in total thrown out, including Weinstein and Polanski and so on and so forth. So I think, in answer to your question, he did the right thing to resign. My concern about it is this. First of all, the joke wasn't very good from Chris Rock, and I know you've got a specialist coming on to talk about how devastating it is, particularly for women, to lose their hair. It does raise all sorts of questions about the boundaries of comedy. And you know, if you listen to any of Rickett Gervais's things at the Golden Globe, everybody's up for it. You do that sort of stuff. People were saying, was it staged? There's no way it was staged, simply because it's a career potentially destroying moment for Will Smith. But my biggest objection of all is that it's bounced everything, all the good news, off the papers. So, for example, it's the first time ever that Samuel Jackson won an Oscar. First time ever. Nobody's talking about that. The wonderful moment, and I was in tears about this bit. The bit I was in tears about was how Lady Gaga, with such dignity, helped Liza Minnelli, who was in a wheelchair, struggling over the words and so on and so forth. And she was there. It was reminiscent of what she did with Tony Bennett and so on and so forth. And it was. Do watch that clip if you haven't seen it. Lady Gaga was brilliant. Liza Minnelli was struggling, is the short answer. And Lady Gaga was just so elegant. And a word which is sort of caught off, basically off microphone, was sort of, don't worry, I've got you. And you could hear that in some of the audio, things like that, and that sort of stuff. The other thing that's also thrown off the papers is that scientists have published, for the first time, a complete sequence of the human genome. And what that means that we can, it's basically the building blocks of DNA, which is brilliant. And nobody's really talking about it. It is one of the most seismic moments in medical history, because they've been trying to do this for at least 20 years. What this means is that we can identify diseases, like things like cancer. We look at illnesses and so on and so forth, and how we might be able to fix those in the future. So what I would say, yes, it's tragic what's happening about Will. The Academy will make a decision, whatever happens. I think Will needs to redefine himself, but he's owning the narrative. But my point is, let's look at the good stories, because there are plenty around.
Have you got any good stories for us?
Here's another news story for some of us who live on coffee. This could be bad news here, and it's basically how coffee takes its toll on all of us. You know, what is it? Is it ruining your face? Experts reveal how bad it can be for your face. Dehydrates it, get ticks in the eyes, dizziness, muscle tremors, insomnia and high blood pressure, but it all takes its toll on your face. I'm somebody who has multiple espressos before I do anything in the morning, so I might be cutting down now, having realised what it does to the old face there. Well,
something's ruined my face. I'm not entirely sure. Andrew, I'm not sure it's. I don't actually drink that much coffee, so I can't even use that as an excuse to it. But I wish I could have. I've got no excuse for my face being ruined.
The great thing about coffee and various other things is you can find any report to support any view. Just before Christmas, there was a report saying how good coffee was for you, and it would prevent things like dementia and so on and so forth. So I'll send you a different link so you can pick whichever view you like. It's like most things on the internet. There's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but question everything.
And choose your own truth. Andrew, I'm loving that. That's exactly what I'll be doing. Thank you so much for going through the papers. Now, food outlets with over 250 employees will need to display calorie information on their menus.
It's all part of the calorie labelling regulations brought in to help customers make more informed and healthier choices.
Joining us now is Emma McClarkin, who is the CEO of the British Beer and Pub Association. So, Emma, why, oh why, are we doing this?
Well, it is now required from the 6th of April that those pubs, and we're talking about half the pubs in the UK now, display calorie labelling on their menus. And whilst we're committed to helping the government and our customers become healthier, it is something that is adding extra burden to businesses and extreme cost at a time where we're recovering from the pandemic. We're already seeing energy costs soaring. And so this is really some untimely added burden from the government.
Emma, it certainly put me off when I went into a pub and saw these calories listed on the menu. And what slightly put me off is that it said on the menu that you're supposed to have around 2,000 calories a day. And the thing I was about to pick was, I think, 2,350 calories. So I quickly made a different choice, knowing the wrath I'd get from Esther if I was to order in one meal something that was more than my daily calorific intake. So I just wondered, that clearly led to a change in my customer behaviour. So for those places that have already introduced it, have they seen any impact on their customers' behaviour as a result of this?
It has received mixed reviews, I have to say, and largely negative ones, because people just want to come in and have a treat and not feel guilty about it. I think there is, unfortunately, now when they see the calories, they maybe make healthier decisions, which is, of course, a positive, but at the same time, they want to come out and enjoy themselves, celebrate perhaps. And, you know, a treat once in a while in moderation is no bad thing. But of course, now it's just that extra burden and the seasonality of our menus. We love to have changes in the menu, but that's going to be very difficult for businesses to do. If they've done a massive print run of their menus, it's going to cost them tens of thousands to reprint. So it is unfortunately something that we're going to have to learn to encompass into our business models, but it's not being as warmly welcomed by our customers.
It seems to me all designed to make life more miserable. But what I wanted to know, because I'm quite intrigued by this, is how do you work out how many calories there are in a meal that's about to be served, and then who checks that information is right? I mean, I sort of, in my cynical moments, think, I could open up somewhere and claim I've got the healthiest fish and chips in the world and say it's only got, 400 calories in it. And who's going to know any better? Who checks up to make sure that the information on these menus is accurate?
Well, I do wonder, Philip. I mean, I think the calorie police will be out there, but I imagine that there is unfortunately quite a lot of estimation going on, and it'll probably be a higher estimation just to make sure that they're completely covered. But it will restrict menus because they'll need to have those calorie calculations in the bag. So again, if you wanted to have a special on the menu, that's not going to be possible to do because it'll be harder to calculate those calories. So it is an unfortunate thing to come in at this moment in time in this period of recovery. We really hope that the government will understand that going forwards, whilst we want to inform our customers, of course we do need to understand the burden it's going to put on our businesses going forward. And we hope that we can see a moratorium on any more legislation coming in that's going to add further burden at this moment in time.
Well, in the Mail here, Dr. Michael Mosley, and he's talking about the calories on menus, and the title is No, It Won't Slim Us Down, and he's looking at a study in New York from 2016 that looked at the impact of this labelling, so introduced quite a while ago, 10 years earlier, and he said it did a little insignificant drop at first, and then it just disappeared and had no effect whatsoever, having those calorie labels next to the food. So that's one thing. So tiny change, I think it was less than 60 calories per item, so the whole meal, and then nothing. And then the other article in the Times today, calorie count fails top chef's taste test. Because they're saying calories aren't the most important thing. It's actually about your nutrition and what else is going on there. They're saying it's a blunt instrument, and some of them say they're going to defy the law. So, you know, if you had a message then going back to those ministers, those MPs trying to put these calories on menus, I mean, what would your message be back to them, Emma?
We had asked the government for a delay to the introduction of this legislation. We really hadn't had enough time or resource to prepare ourselves for it. So ideally, we'd have liked to seen this delayed, but the entry point is next week. And many businesses will be scrambling to make sure that they are going to comply with this. You know, we just need to be mindful and get some balance in here of the impact that it's going to have on the businesses that are running day to day versus the outcome or the benefit of introducing that legislation. And if, as you say, it's quite negligible, but the cost of business is huge, then we really need them to take a common sense approach to this. But I just encourage everybody out there, you know, still go out and enjoy yourselves and celebrate life in moderation. And having that rare treat is something that we love, and particularly down at the local pub. So don't be afraid to go out still and enjoy yourselves.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. I'll tell you one thing, I know it was the talk of the pub when we were there. Nobody was talking about anything else. It was, look at these calories, do we want it? Is it necessary? Are we going to take any attention? It was the talk of the pub we were there. And one other thing people are saying, do you know what, we're having such difficulty getting staff at the moment. You talk about all of the increasing costs, energy, VAT, all of these things, but they're saying we can't find staff. Who's the person now who's going to be doing all the calorie counting? Who's going to be doing this? So lots of implications in your local pub. Thank you for joining us this morning.
It'll certainly take more than a calorie count for me to lose weight, I think, to be perfectly honest. I think they have to be a bit more radical than that, to be honest. Stop eating might help, but
you're going to get on that cycling machine, aren't you, over Easter?
Well, so you keep telling me. Anyway, we'd love to hear your views about whether or not the calorie count on menus is going to change the way that you shop and where you go for your food, whether you're going to go to somewhere that doesn't have a calorie count on it because they're a smaller outlet, or, you know, what do you think about it?
You're just going to ignore it.
Like me. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear what you think.
But coming up, we'll speak to showbiz reporter Stephanie about the fallout from the Will Smith slap at the Oscars.
And with COVID cases on the rise, we'll speak to Professor Carl Hennigan, asking him, should we be concerned? All this and much more after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
welcome back. US actor Will Smith has resigned from the Oscars Academy after slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage during last week's event.
In a statement, the actor said he had betrayed the trust of the Academy and that his actions were inexcusable.
The Academy accepted Smith's immediate resignation from the organisation, but will continue to move forward with its disciplinary proceedings against him.
Let's get more reaction from showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci, and she joins us in the studio. Good morning, Stephanie.
Morning, Esther.
So what did you make of all this?
Oh, my gosh. It was in the middle of the night, and I was watching it, and I was gobsmacked. I was just like, is this real? Is this staged? What is going on? This is supposed to be Will Smith's biggest night of his career. Before the slap, I would have said it was well-deserved for him to win this. He's put so much effort into his career over the 3 decades. So many films we love, Men in Black, Independence Day, and this was his moment to shine. And I was literally like, you could not make this stuff up on one of Hollywood's biggest night. What did you guys think? Did you think it was staged?
Well, to be fair, when I saw it, like you, I thought, no, I can't understand this. He knows the show is watched by billions of people.
Yeah.
It's not a private sort of matter. It's being watched there, and I'm thinking, is it pre-organised?
Yeah.
And then people showed you it in slow-mo. It wasn't a punch, it was a slap.
Exactly.
So then I thought, well, maybe it was. But then, when he came back with all the expletives, etc., I thought, no, this really isn't.
That's
this
beyond.
Is unfolding very, very badly here.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite understand how he lost it so much.
But it was an interesting point, though, about it being a slap and not a punch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think that, because, you know, if you felt so, you know...
he would have gone...
You thought you might go and punch him, but maybe the slap, I thought that might have been staged, the fact that it was just sort of...
I also thought maybe he didn't know what he was doing. You know, when you put yourself up there, you're starting, and then he thought, what am I doing? And then he feels he's got to do something. It was just car crash.
That's why a lot of people are thinking it was premeditated, and as he was walking up, he could have just walked back, you know. He had that moment when he was walking up towards Chris Rock where he was actually thinking in his head, what am I going to do on stage? And I think Chris Rock was taken back, and you could see that on his face, because he was like, I've just been slapped by Will Smith. And it's like, even then, he was still bringing comedy to what happened. But, you know, in the days that's followed, he says he's still processing it himself, and he will talk about it, he said. He said it will be serious, but he said he's going to do a fun little skit about it as well.
The interesting thing was in the Mirror today on page 3, it talks about how the Los Angeles Police Department were going to charge him, but that Chris Rock has said he doesn't want to press charges.
Which I think is very nice of Chris Rock, but as well, if he did press charges, it would have been a long, drawn-out affair, and as we can tell already, the Academy already looking to discipline Will about his actions as well. So I think Chris Rock knows that Will Smith is going to get his fair due, and to be honest, his big night has been overshadowed by his actions. And Will Smith and Chris Rock, they've had this history, a frosty history, where this isn't the first time Chris Rock has attacked Jada or made fun of her. So I think it was all leading up to that moment.
I just wondered if, I mean, he's resigned, and I just therefore wonder what disciplinary action they can take after he's resigned from the organisation. I mean, could they take the Oscar away from him? Is that a possibility? It seems a bit unlikely, isn't it?
I doubt they will. So with the Academy, they've got an Academy Board of Governors, which is made up of 54 members, mostly actors, Whoopi Goldberg, Steven Spielberg. So these are among the people who are going to decide the outcome for Will. And earlier on this week, Whoopi Goldberg said, we are not going to be taking the Oscar from him. So she's kind of said that's off the table, but he will be disciplined. But he's been quite smart by saying he's going to resign, because now they can't say they're going to expel him and whatever, so they will bring their own results, and more likely they'll suspend him, but whatever they say, it doesn't make a difference, because he's been smart and resigned himself from the membership.
Now, I know there was other articles in the papers today, one in the Times, saying, oh, has this, in a way, updated the Oscars, which seemed very much out of date? Has this given them the new lease of life? And will next year see the return of Rock and Smith as maybe they host the awards together? So is this something that's, you know, reinvigorated the Oscars?
Sadly, yes, it has. It's taken it. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it beats virtue signaling speeches from the platform, though, doesn't it?
It has, because this is what people, I know everyone's been shocked, but look, it's been a talking point around the world.
So how about the Grammys then? That's on tomorrow night, which is always, theirs has usually been about clothes. That J-Lo dress, with the, down, well, naked down to the navel. I couldn't think of any other words. Lady Gaga arriving in an egg. So what's going to happen at the Grammys?
I always like to say the Grammys are like the Oscars' naughty sister, and they are, because musicians are more out of control than actresses and actors, and tomorrow is going to be a big one for the Grammys. They've moved from California to Las Vegas, which is obviously the biggest place for showbiz, but also the Grammys are trying to be more woke as well. They've done for their big 4 awards, like the Artist, Best Song, they've increased it to 10 nominees to make it more inclusive and more diverse. But someone like Kanye West, I would have been watching out for him. He's not allowed to come to the awards. They said that he was due to perform, but they said they won't allow him to perform due to his current online behaviour.
The Oscars have booked him for next year. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
No worries.
Now, with COVID-19 infections rising across most of the UK...
In England and Wales, the virus is now circulating at levels last seen at the start of February.
Joining us now is Professor Carl Hennigan, who is a clinical epidemiologist and from Oxford University. Carl, thank you so much for joining us. How concerned should we be about this rise in COVID cases?
Well, you're welcome. What's happening now is what you see is a sort of circulation of coronaviruses as we come to the end of spring. Actually, they do rise again. And if you go back 2 years ago when we went into restrictions, it's a very similar pattern to what was happening then. What we shouldn't do is need to panic, because if you look at the data now, actually it's coming off, and actually it's slowed to a point where actually it's now going negative. So what you're going to see in the next few weeks is actually these cases come off dramatically. Now, it's going to be difficult to tell that because all of the testing has disappeared. But what you'll see is the survey that's done by the ONS will show that as we go now into spring and summer, these cases should follow a pattern where they drop off. So I don't think we need to be concerned. What I talk about now is just being risk aware, understanding your own risk as you go about the world. What's the risk to you? What can you do to minimize the damage of having a virus? What can you do to protect yourself? But still think about those that are the most vulnerable in society. There are still issues about how we go forward caring for them and making sure they receive the most appropriate care so that they don't succumb to the effects of a virus like this.
And has the increase in cases been replicated by an increase in the number of people in hospital with COVID?
Yeah, so what we've seen is, and I think we're learning this because we've never truly understood what's happened with viruses. So cases in hospital have gone to about 20,000. But importantly, a proportion of them, even up to half, have not gone in with COVID that's been detected because you're testing everybody on admission. And you'll pick up those that are infectious, but those that are past infected. The important number to look at is those that are in the intensive care unit that go into what we call the most severe, the ventilation beds. And they're still very low numbers. If you look at it in the UK, it's about 356. And think of the population, that's 67 million people. That's a very low number. For comparison, if you go back a year ago in the winter of 2021, there was about 4,000 people on the intensive care bed. So we're in a much better place than what we were previously. And that's where there's a big difference in terms of how we now deal with this virus going forward.
Now, Carl, you're the director of the University of Oxford's Centre of Evidence-Based Medicine. And what I want to know is what happened to you this week on Twitter? Because you were bringing that evidence-based knowledge to public awareness.
So, we're really interested. It's the clues in the title. We're interested in evidence. We did a report just to look at, can we understand this issue of who died with or from COVID? We went back to pre-existing evidence. We went back to huge numbers of freedom of information requests and put out a report that said it's very confusing. We might never get to the truth because there are so many definitions of death. And with that, nobody has done what we call is verify those deaths. And I can talk about how you go about that. That report went out. It got covered in the press. It was in the Mail, in the Express. And what happened on the Sunday morning is that I didn't put an opinion on there. I just retweeted the Mail article, and it came with the picture and the headline. And the article included the word could. And immediately within about 2 hours, I got an email saying my Twitter account has violated Twitter rules and I'm now suspended. I have to say that really concerned me, because it wasn't my opinion we're talking about. It was an attack on the free press. And I think, that creates huge issues, because if you're not free to ask questions, which I've done for 25 years now, ask questions, try and find the evidence. Don't give your opinion, give the evidence. Now, these are really seriously important issues when we're talking about what's going to happen here is if we don't like your opinion, we don't like your question, we're going to censor you. And I think these are dangerous times in terms of that issues going forward that do need to be sorted.
And how did you stand up for yourself? How did you get back on Twitter, or how did you point out that this was facts, not opinion?
Well, I didn't do anything, to be honest, because I think about 12 hours, 24 hours later, what happened is Twitter came back and said, we've made a mistake. Now, that obviously occurs sometimes, I don't know why, but the papers picked up on this and ran articles, and I'm aware Nadine Dorries has picked this up and said the new government bill will deal with this issue, because he just can't go around turning around, and I assume it was some element of artificial intelligence or somebody who didn't like the headline just said, I'm going to have this ban, and then 12, 24 hours later, it's a bit like, I don't know whether they've got it wrong, but I have no explanation, so I can't answer the question of what makes a difference between you being taken down and what makes a difference between them deciding to put you back up there.
Yeah, well, and the only reason I wanted to bring this to the fore, I mean, I was aware of you a long time ago, and this was to do with the Primados case, where parents of children who they'd taken this pregnancy test, a hormone pregnancy test, and the impacts it had on their children, and they were desperately looking for support, desperately trying to understand the medicine they'd taken, desperately trying to maybe take a case against a pharmaceutical company, and it was your evidence-based way of going about things through Oxford University and what you did there that gave these families so much support. And I think people need to, have that. We need to have these freedoms.
So you're talking about an incredibly important case there, Primados. And I remember when Marie Lyon first contacted me and I said, look, this is what we do. We look at the evidence. If the evidence supports you, we'll let you know, but if it doesn't, we'll do the same. We're not influenced by opinions, by commercialization. Primados is a very good example of using systematic review methods to collate all of the evidence and not do what has happened throughout this pandemic is cherry pick the bit of the evidence that support your argument. And what we've seen throughout this pandemic is the first pandemic in the social media era, where people really have tried to influence what happened next with saying there's a simple solution, when actually there's been far more uncertainty about many interventions. And in posing the questions, it's been very difficult to get through to people about a virus, about an endemic virus that's out there, and think about how you manage it sensibly, as opposed to what you think should happen next. And I'd say to everybody, all your listeners, go and look at the Primados story. There's some great pieces out there that will explain, what goes wrong if you don't respond to the evidence and you respond to the push of a commercialized world where you try to push a treatment that led to significant devastating consequences for women.
Carl, I just wanted to highlight an article by Camilla Tominey in The Telegraph today on page 25, which is called "Public Sector is Still Living in a Lockdown Fantasy." And she mentions in this article how, the passport office is still saying mask wearing is compulsory in their office. There was a dry cleaner in her village who told her that the council's still reluctant to open the high street to cars, but they stopped going down the high street during the pandemic. Bradford Council told me, I asked them, that my local council, I asked them how many staff were still working from home, and they said they didn't know, which was quite alarming, to be perfectly honest. I just wondered if you had a view about whether or not, given the number of cases there are, whether or not there's a good reason for these public sector bodies to carry on with these COVID restrictions, even though the government have in effect said that they should all be scrapped.
Yeah, so I think throughout this pandemic, what we've seen is about 50% of the people could work from home and 50% of people had to go to their jobs because it required them to do so. And in doing that, you've seen the first split in society. People who've carried on with their normal activities are still in a position now where they're going, well, not much has changed for me. But what we did with the fear messaging is create a significant portion of people very scared, who basically have spent 18 months to 2 years still at home and are now finding it very difficult to re-emerge into a normal world, particularly so if they still think, well, after 2 years, I haven't faced this virus and I have actually missed it. So I want to carry on in that vein. The problem is, as we emerge from this, is all the societal and economic problems are amounting and are going to continue for the medium and long term. So this is where we've got to go from a risk-averse approach to this risk-aware approach. Just be aware of your risks as you go about your life, but actually you've got to emerge into society and help society get back to a normal functioning, if you like. Now, in doing that, I think it's the public sector has a duty and a role to help the economy and the society and get back to work. But I recognise for many people this is very difficult because for 2 years they've had this messaging at them that particularly they're all potentially going to kill grandma. And I understand why people are finding it difficult. The good news is I think over the last 4 to 8 weeks, and I think as we go into summer, I think we'll see people more and more emerge back into normality.
Professor Carl Hennigan, thank you very much indeed. And from us here, you keep going with your evidence-based research and keep giving us those facts. Thank you very much indeed. But I think he's right there, going from risk-averse to risk-aware. I mean, we see this hardly anybody in the offices. When we go into work, people aren't in work, and really we do need to get back into the office, get back living our lives.
Absolutely. Now, coming up, it's been 40 years since the Argentinian forces invaded the British overseas territory of the Falkland Islands. We find out what it was like from a veteran who fought in the war.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Believe it or not, it's been 40 years since Argentinian forces invaded the British overseas territory of the Falkland Islands.
With a dispute over sovereignty, the Prime Minister of the day, Margaret Thatcher, sent a task force of warships to the Falklands in response.
Well, what was it like for those that were part of the task force sent to retake the British territory from the Argentinians? I'm pleased to say we're joined by Lord West, former Chief of Defence Intelligence and Security Minister under Gordon Brown, but most importantly, Lord West, a Falklands veteran. We've seen that you wrote an article in the Daily Express today about it. What was your role at the time of the Falklands?
I'm afraid I'm finding it very difficult to hear you. But can you hear me all right?
We can hear you loud and clear, Lord West. We were just wanting to know what it was like for you.
You sound as though you're underwater, but I can tell you what my sort of views of the Falklands were without being able to hear you that well. I mean, I think my perspective of it, is that it was a huge achievement for our nation to send a task force 8,000 miles, that immense distance, and to be able to actually recover the Falklands. And it was done so quickly. The Argentinians invaded on the 2nd of April, and we had won and thrown them out by the 14th of June, which is quite remarkable, really. But of course, as is always the case, I'm afraid any wars are horrible things. And you only have to have fought in one or two of them, as I have, to realise how horrible they are. And it means you lose people. And we lost, I think it was some 265 men in the Falklands, and many were injured, some physically and some mentally. And of course, that is always a very hard thing, because you're dealing with people who are loved by their children, their parents, their partners. I noticed it particularly. I lost 22 of my boys after my ship was abandoned and blew up, and I wrote letters, for example, to each of the next of kin. I also wrote a letter when I knew that these people had a child who was very young, a few months old or a couple of years old, for it to be opened when they were 18. And recently, one of these children said he would like to come and talk to me because it meant so much to him, seeing that letter about his father, who he'd never known, really. And so wars always result in loss, and that is the sad thing. But I think sometimes they have to be done. And as Plato said, only the dead have seen the last of war. We know this from the Ukraine. And I think in the case of the Falklands, rather like Ukraine, there was this attack by a very, very unpleasant group of people, the junta in the Argentine and it's Putin in Russia, and attacked a country that was full of people who wanted self-determination, were happy as they were, didn't want to change their status, and the junta in the Argentine decided otherwise and invaded them with no reason whatsoever to do it. And it was quite right and proper, and it was good that we were able to actually go down and eject them. And the results of that war were good, because in the Argentine they changed their junta, which had killed thousands of Argentinians. They got rid of the junta because they fell apart after that war. I think our status as a nation grew because in the 70s we'd been the sort of sick man of Europe. And I think there was a pulling together of people, and they felt we could achieve things. It was very interesting thereafter. Britain was on a bit of a roll. And the Falkland Islanders themselves, I've been there a number of times since, they're wealthier, more established. They still wish to remain British. They exercise their self-determination. And so the outcome was good. And because the Falklands weren't full of civilians, sadly, it's still sad, only 3 civilians were killed. This makes it, of course, very different from the Ukraine, where it's taking place in built-up areas and things like that. But this war was able to be taken place between basically 2 militaries, and although it's still horrible, that makes it better than one where there are a lot of civilians involved.
All right, I hope you can hear me now, and it doesn't sound as if I'm still on the Falkland Islands, but I just wondered, how big a risk was it for Mrs Thatcher to send a task force to the Falklands at the time? It seems now that it was inevitable that we would reclaim the Falklands, but how inevitable was it at the time when she actually made that decision?
It was. There's no doubt that it was a bit nip and tuck. As I said, it was 8,000 miles the reality is actually there are only two nations in the world that could have done it. One is the Americans and ourselves. The Russians didn't have sufficient aircraft on aircraft carriers to do it. The French didn't have sufficient amphibious ships to do it. So there are only two countries that could do it. The Americans, of course, had huge power and could have done it. Although I have to say, probably they'd have ended up killing nearly everyone in the Falklands. That's the way they go about things. But it was initially felt in the UK when the invasion took place, the advice from the Ministry of Defence, because the Chief of Defence Staff was in New Zealand, but from the Ministry of Defence was, we can't do this, it can't be done, we can't do anything militarily, we'll have to try and negotiate. Well, Henry Leach, who was the first Sea Lord, he heard that Margaret Thatcher was meeting with the Foreign Secretary and the Defence Secretary in Parliament. He rushed there in uniform and burst in on the meeting, and the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I've come to say, Prime Minister, that I can pull a task force together and we can recover these islands." And then he said something he felt he shouldn't as First Sea Lord. He said, "And I think we should do that, Prime Minister, because otherwise tomorrow we'll be a very different nation." And Margaret Thatcher, of course, absolutely jumped at this opportunity, having been told nothing militarily could be done. To be told it could, she seized the opportunity, and she released in the next couple of days £2.5 billion from the reserve. Remember, this was in 1982, and that money was, of course, used doing things to ships and the like, and the task group to be able to go down there. And the task force sailed very quickly indeed. It's interesting looking today, isn't it, that we have a war going on in Europe, in the Ukraine, and the possibility of a world war. God forfend that happens. And yet, actually, the government haven't increased any or put any extra money into the armed forces. But that's an aside, but I am amazed by that. And so the force sailed for the south, and of course, the winter was about to approach in the South Atlantic. You know, terrible sea states down there, horrible weather. But our Navy had been used to operating right up in the North Atlantic, right up in the Arctic, countering the Russians in the Cold War. And so we were used to doing that. And we were able to get down there. We lost a number of ships getting our forces ashore, but we landed 5,000 troops, 5,000 tons of equipment without any of that being lost at all. We lost ships protecting it, but that landed. And once it was ashore, although there was some stiff fighting at times, it was a foregone conclusion. We were going to win. And that's why it all happened so quickly.
And just in a short sentence, if you could, I guess the key question is, do we have the defence capability to do the same thing today, should we be in the same situation?
If you'd asked me that 4 years ago, I'd have said absolutely not, because you can only do this sort of operation this far from your country if you have aircraft carriers. And now, thank goodness, we have got aircraft carriers again. But as regards the supporting ships, I think at the time of the Falklands, we had something like 70 or so, 75 escorts, frigates and destroyers. Our nation now has 18, which is a national disgrace. And so I think in those terms, it would be difficult. Another thing is we use 76 merchant ships in retaking the Falklands. And of course, they were manned by British merchant sailors. And we can see from this P&O thing going on at the moment, we're getting less and less British merchant sailors because the firms rather like employing cheap foreign sailors. But when you're in a war, you can't rely on them to fight for you. So there are a number of things like that that would make it much more difficult.
Lord West, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Now, imagine if we could grant you the power to rule the world. What would you do with it?
Would you be a force for good, or would you want to cause a stir? And what would be the very first thing you would change?
Well, this week's guest is the actor Adam Rickett, most famous for playing Nick Tilsey in Coronation Street and Kyle Kelly in Hollyoaks. He's also an entrepreneur. He's got his own bar in Knutsford there. So tell us, Adam, if you could rule the world, what would you do? What is the first law that you would pass?
I know there's many things I would like to do. I kind of think, though, as a species, the first thing you need to do is show responsibility. And I think where we are still to this day criminally poor in that is in our animal welfare. I've been a long-term advocate for animal welfare, both domestic and, for farming. And I think still to this day, unfortunately, it's terrible. I mean, last year we did have Finn's Law passed, which allowed maximum prison sentences of 5 years rather than 6 months. But you've got to remember that 5 years is for somebody, if you think about Harold Shipman or Ted Bundy or Jack the Ripper, they're the people who would get 5 years. You can take your dog outside, set it on fire, and you'll get a 6 month suspended prison sentence and a £1,000 fine. And I think that's just still to this day absolute disgrace. So not only would I like to see the sentencing increased for people who abuse animals, I'd actually like to see the guidelines increased as well. Our judiciary system has to operate within very well-defined parameters of if you do this thing, you get that punishment. And unfortunately, still to this day, animal welfare, it's too lenient. We've seen it especially during lockdown. People have rushed out and bought pets because they had nothing else to do. And we're now seeing those dogs dumped in massive droves at animal shelters or unfortunately abused really badly. And I think, as I said, as a species, we are the alpha on this planet. And I think showing more responsibility in that respect should be done by better treatment of our pets.
Adam, I think that's wonderful there. We are a nation of animal lovers, but like you say, if you do something as heinous as that, we should absolutely pay the price and do the sentence for it. Now, when you look back on your acting career, what is your, I smile as I look where you are. You're in Dexter's there in Knutsford, and you haven't quite got the Rover's return of Coronation Street, but you have got a lot of community spirit, and I know you're doing a lot locally on use it or lose it, come to the high street, support your local area.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in a small village in Cheshire, and I've always been a bit of a country bumpkin rather than an urbanite. And even in my lifetime, I've just seen the utter whitewash of our village and town communities, where the local pubs have shut, the local post offices have shut, the local banks have shut. And I think, the one good thing that did come out of COVID was the fact that it did inspire people to shop local. And it's all well and good in 5 years' time when our high streets and our town centres are, deserted and all there is in there is chain restaurants like Starbucks and Costa's and things like that, and that's all there is. Everyone's going to be throwing their arms up in the air and lamenting it. But the power is with, you, the shopper, you, the local. I support my local butcher. I support my local greengrocer. Could I get it cheaper at Tesco's? Probably, but the produce itself would be far inferior. And I also think with petrol prices going up now as well, actually driving to one of the supermarket chains is probably going to cost you more than the difference in the food itself. So I do think, there is this amazing community ability to actually revive a town, and we've seen it in many places like Altrincham with its Altrincham market. Knutsford itself has been very resilient on the high street, and I think that kind of community support, it's not something which can be dictated from above from our government or from our MPs. Unfortunately, it's something we have to make as a conscious choice. And I think although it is slightly difficult at times, and it is especially with what's coming this year going to be more painful, meeting those increased costs. You've got to remember that, in 20 years' time, you'll probably still be living in that same town, in that same village. And if it is now a desert, where does that community go from there?
Yeah. And your acting days, what do you think, when you look back at Nick Tilsley, what do you think? Are they happy memories?
I think he had the most stupid haircut in the world I've ever seen in my life, quite frankly. No, I mean, I think like most industries, COVID, there he is, what a dork. COVID had a massive impact.
Don't knock it, Adam. You were a heartthrob. We loved you.
I was very lucky. I had my bar to fall back on. But as an industry, oh good lord,
we had to have an excuse to get your torso out, Adam.
Not anymore. No, I mean it's I've always acted, and I've always loved it, and I always will do it. The industry, as I said, it's only just starting to come back to life now. It's because essentially we couldn't get insurance, and because everyone's self-employed, there was really no government support for the entertainment industry throughout lockdown, and it's only just now starting to kick back off, which is exciting. But yeah, I mean it's I've been very lucky, to be honest with you, in my career. I got into Coronation Street 2 weeks after leaving school, having never acted a day in my life, which you could tell. And I've just been very lucky to have worked consistently now for 24 years.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you in Dexter and Jones in the near future.
Dexter and Jones musical, it's coming.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK's looking a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers and remaining rather chilly. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest will be rather cloudy, particularly in the west, where there'll also be the most frequent showers. The best of the sunny spells will be across eastern areas. The southeast will be mostly dry, although an isolated light shower is possible this evening. The winds will be light, with plenty of sunny spells. There'll also be sunny spells and isolated showers across Wales, but drier for much of the day, especially in the west. It will be a mostly dry end to the afternoon across the Midlands too. An isolated light shower is possible, but for most it will be light winds and bright or sunny spells. The northeast of England will finish Saturday afternoon with plenty of dry weather. Earlier showers will have faded, and we end the day with light winds and plenty of sunshine on offer. There'll also be plenty of sunshine across southern Scotland this evening. There'll be some cloud at times too, but it will remain dry to end the day. It's a similar story for Northern Ireland this evening. Dry here also, with some fair weather, cloud and sunny spells, leading to a cold and frosty night to come. Clear spells and light winds will also lead to a cold and frosty night across most of the UK tonight, and that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas